Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Devin Barrett, also known as DBB, and I will be moderating for you today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, just go ahead and post those up in the chat, and I will either answer them myself, save them for NotCo for later, or bring them up in the middle of the presentation because I have nigh omnipotent power. And without any further ado, allow me to introduce the man of the hour, the gentleman himself, Mr. David Allen Notco. Go ahead and take it away, Notco.
Thank you, DBB. I must apologize. If DBB does have this omnipotent power, it would be great if he could get my camera working. Unfortunately, I am receiving this error message. I hope you guys can see that and understand that I don't have it in use in any other program. I don't know why it's doing this. I really wish you could see me right now, but unfortunately, this is what I am facing at the moment.
It seems I only have semi-nigh omnipotent power, but I'll see what I can do on my side.
Yeah, I don't have any other application running or any messenger application or even the camera itself in Windows running, and it's unable to use my webcam. So I don't know what's going on there. Unless I have the wrong one selected, which I might. Give me 1 second. Aha. Looks like we might have success here now. There we go. Hello, everybody. This is more like it. All right, I am David Alanatko, and welcome to Cache and Release. We're setting up a caching solution using ConnectWise Automate. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we look at the agenda, I want to ask, what is caching? Well, caching enables your agents check for Windows Update files or external URLs and automate server downloads, meaning programs that you may distribute or applications that you distribute to your agents. If a file is not available in that cache, the original agent or the first agent that goes and tries to download that file will create a temporary file to let other agents know, hey, I'm in the process of getting this file. This will prevent other agents from downloading as the original agent downloads it. So this goes ahead and has everyone kind of put in a wait or a pause, so to speak. So we're not causing a lot of traffic on our network. And once the original download is complete and is installed, it transfers the installation file to the cache directory where now the other agents can pick up and use that file. Those other agents will see that temporary file. They'll go, okay, I'll wait a minute here. They'll wait for the other agent to finish installing. They'll now check that cache directory again and go, oh, the installer is there. Now I can pull the program locally and install the update or the application or whatever that I need to install. So how does that all work? Well, we're going to take a look at that today. So the agenda to start out is we're going to set up caching on an agent or a client location within Automate. That'll first consist of setting up the share. Somewhere in that client's location on one of their machines, we want to set up where we're going to cache everything. We want to make sure that this is something that has plenty of space so we can be able to put updates and other things in there. Once we have the share set up in the client location itself, then we can set up in the location and Automate the general and deployments and defaults tab. We'll look at the setup there, what the differences are between the two, and how your agents can utilize either or of those tabs. After that, we have to let Automate know that, hey, these agents are going to be set up for caching. So we'll create some caching EDFs in Automate, extra data fields or additional fields, whatever you may want to call them. Once we set those up, then Automate will know what it needs to do with the agents in order to start caching with them. After that, we assign the template settings, which we're going to create a caching template. And that caching template is going to inform our agents how to get to the caching location on the client. The template's going to basically tell them this is the username, this is the password, this is the drive location. This is where you need to go to check for those updates before you go out and do your thing. So within that caching template, you can set up the username and password or set up an admin username and password. And those two things pertain to what is set up on the general tab versus the deployments and defaults tab. Both of those relate to each other, and we'll look at that a little bit later on to expand on that. Once we have that set up and we have our template established, now we need to set up the caching group. And the caching group is going to have the search that we're going to create. And that search is going to look for the EDF that we set up earlier. And it will put those agents into that group so they can get the template settings we set up. The group will apply the caching template to the agents in that group. And then after we have all of that set up, in the end, we're going to verify the setup. That means we're going to be testing the credentials. And once we have the credentials successfully tested, we will look at the device itself and automate, making sure that it is in the correct group, that it has the correct template settings assigned to it. And then a final check at the end, we're actually going to be installing an update to a machine, and we can watch the whole process, what it does from start to finish when everything is set up successfully. All right, so first we will go with the caching setup. Sorry, I just saw the question from Gavin Stone in there on have I tried turning it off and on again for the webcam? No. So we'll start with the caching setup. First, we're going to establish where we want to cache these updates or these applications that we want to distribute to agents later on in the future. We want to pick a machine, of course, that has plenty of storage. The thing with caching is machines will store the files in there, but you will have to go in and every once in a while clean that cache location out. Once the installer remains in there, it's in there. If you have something that has been in there for maybe over 30 days, and you could have an agent that is a little behind and maybe comes into that location and checks to see if the file is there, it may go out and re-download that update. So you want to keep that in mind. You want to have something that has a good amount of storage in it. So simply in Windows, I set up a folder on the C drive of this machine because this machine has tons of space on it. And I went and established a caching folder. And when I go to share that folder, you can see that I've created the folder here, and I've created a common user for that folder just called serve admin. And this is the user that's going to be able to read and write and delete things out of this folder. So this user will be what is used in Automate in setting up the location for the credentials to use to talk to the server with the agents. You'll want to make sure that they have a full access or read-write access to this folder. So now that I have that set up and Windows is ready to go at this client location, now I can take it to the next step and I can go to set up caching on the client location in Automate itself. So in Automate, I go ahead and open up the location under the client, whatever location that may be, and I remain here on the General tab. The General tab is what's going to host our settings for our initial caching setup. In particular, we're going to be setting up the script and template variables. There we'll establish the drive, username, and password. Now with this setup here in general, what we'll put in is the same location that we just shared on that client's network or in that location. So you can see for the machine, I have the McQueenie server caching folder. And then the username that I established earlier, the serve admin, is now in here. In this case, there is not a domain in this case, so it is an account that is going to be common amongst the other machines there. However, you can put in your regular domain information and then your username. And then when you enter in the password, whether you have anything in here or not, this button is always going to say change. So you would click that button and then you can enter in the password. This is useful if you ever have to go back and change the username and password. You can do it here, and then the template settings we're going to be looking at later is where the template will pick up that new username and password, so you don't have to go and touch 200 agents if you ever have to update this username and password, or if you have a policy in place where, say, you're updating that password every 30 or 60 or 90 days, however you do it. So if you don't want to use these settings here and you want to use something that is listed more in deployments and defaults, what you would set up here in this case is just the drive location. You would leave the username and the password entries empty, because under deployments and defaults is our other option for setting up our username and password for caching. So in the deployments and defaults tab in the location, you would pay particular attention to the agent deployment settings and the login to use for administrator access. What you have selected here is what would be used in the template when you establish your caching settings. You would still have the drive set up under the general tab, but this would be selected here for the username and password for caching. And when we set up the template a little bit later on, I'll show you the difference on the template so you know which one uses which in that setup. So we have our template or our location established for caching. We have it established in Windows on the client network itself. And now the folder is shared. The agents can access that folder. We have our credentials put into the location for Automate, whether under the General tab or we're using the Administrator login from the Deployments and Defaults tab. Now we need to be able to tell Automate these agents are going to be set up for caching. And we do that by opening up the dashboard in Automate, and we'll navigate down to the configurations and additional fields tab. And here you can see that I've set up an additional field called caching enabled on the agent level or the computer level, computer management screen for the agent. Just a very simple checkbox, nothing too fancy here. I set up a new tab called custom-file cache, and just a tooltip that lets anyone know this obviously enables file caching for the agent. Always have to think ahead for that future Automate admin. If someone ever comes along later on, whatever description or anything that can help them out to figure out what things are and why they're there, always be sure to use a meaningful name and a good description whenever you're adding things in there. So with all of this set up here, this is how it'll appear on the agent itself. If we go to the automation icon here and select the extra data fields, you can see the custom file cache is set up here and the caching enabled checkbox is there, ready to go. So I can come in here and check that, and then Automate will know this agent is going to be set up for caching once I get the rest of the settings in place, such as the template settings, the search, and the group. Now, if you don't want to have to check this on an agent per agent basis, you can also do something like this on the location level as well, where you can have basically the same setup. It's just on the locations section instead. So it's still the same checkbox, still the same. I even named the tab the same. The description is slightly different because we're setting it up on the client's location. And when you open up the client location in Automate, under the Info tab is where you would set this extra data field and caching enabled. So now all the agents in that location know that, or for all the agents in Automate, Automate's going to know that we have caching enabled at this location. But if we don't want to do that, DVB also had a question. But what if I only want a computer EDF? Because, hey, sometimes I get it. Sometimes people are lazy. They only want to set up one EDF. So how do I set 200 agents to use caching with just an agent level EDF if you don't want to get into adding another tab to your locations? Maybe your locations have 30 different tabs in there for EDFs, and you don't want to add a yet another tab to have to configure in your location or add to maybe a whole bunch of EDFs you have in there. Well, there's a way to do that too, and that is with a very simple script. You can see I've created a script here called enable file cache, and this enables the file caching EDF at the agent level, and this will affect all the agents in the location. Keep in mind with this though, unless this script is scheduled and running on a regular basis, if I'm manually running this script, any new agents or anything that's added into that location will have to have this script run again, or you'll have to go in and touch those individual agents and set the EDF. So you'll want to keep that in mind. If this is something you want to schedule on the location on a regular basis, you can absolutely do that too. You can see we have just one step to the script, very simple. We're setting the extra data field for caching enabled equals 1. And specifically, we're going to use the extra data set value function here. Caching enabled -1, which is going to tell us we're going to be looking for setting the extra data field on the computer level. So that's 1. The computer ID, the ID for this is going to be %computer ID %. This way, when we execute it on the location and we run it as a script, then Automate is going to be able to pull that variable from whatever system the script is executing on, so it knows what ID to execute this command on. And the value, of course, we're setting it to 1, so go ahead and check that box. With that set up, now we can go ahead and enable caching for the whole location without also having to have a caching EDF as well. Just the downside to that is, again, if you add any agents later on or after the fact, you'll have to make sure to enable caching for those agents manually as well. So we have our Windows set up now, and we have our location established. We've put our EDFs in. So we're pretty much laying the groundwork to get caching started on our agents. Now we have to look at the template settings. So in Automate, again, we're going to open up and create a new template, and I'll simply call this template cache. And we're going to go within the template to the folders and cache directory. Now, the reason I'm making a new template and I'm not using the default template is because maybe not all of my clients are going to be set up with caching. So I don't need this to be on all of my other agents. I'm not going to be adding in extra settings for my agents that don't really require settings like this. So I've set up a new template and I'm going to call it cache because with this template, we're going to apply it to our caching group, and any agents that need the caching settings will be in that group to get this template settings. So here under the folders and cache section, we have to establish the credential settings that we set up before on the location. So we have our cache directory as %drive%. This is going to establish where our location is on the client for caching. So we can have 5 different clients using the same template, and all those locations are going to be unique amongst the different clients. This system variable will allow the agent to pull the information from the location settings for that client to be able to know where to go, where the cache is when it comes to downloading and installing updates or applications. We would use %username% to pull the information again from the location. And here on the cache password, it is going to be all blocked with asterisks here, but under here is %password%. Now, as I mentioned before, if you're not going to use the settings under the general tab and you want to use what's under the deployments and defaults tab, you're going to use slightly different settings when it comes to your caching template. So you may have to create two templates in this case, where one is called cache general and the other one is called cache deployments, or something along those lines. You can see the template on the left I have here is the one that is going to use what is under the general tab. It has the %drive %, %username %, and %password %. That's what's going to establish and use the credentials for the general tab for the agents that you, or for the locations where the general tab will apply. For the locations where the general tab will not apply and they're going to use the deployments and defaults tab, the cache directory is going to be the same. However, the cache username, notice that is now %admin username %, because again, under the deployments and defaults, we're using that login to use for administrator access. So that system variable is %admin username %. And then for the cache password, it's similar there, where it's going to be %admin password %. Again, when you type these in, this will be under asterisk on the password. So to be sure that you're typing in things correctly, and I don't know about anyone else out there, but when I tend to type stuff out, I tend to trip over my keys quite a bit and sometimes make mistakes. So in this example here on the right, if you press F2, you do get a drop down of the different system variables that you can enter in this field. Once you find the one that you selected, in this case, the %admin password %, I'll select that and press enter. Once I press enter, it's now entered into the field. And I know 100% that that field has been entered correctly. The same can go for the general tab settings as well, even though these are asterisks over here, because you can see the %password % is here as well. So if you want to be 100% sure that you've typed out that variable correctly, just use F2, select the variable you want to use, and then just press enter, and it's in there. So now with our caching template set up, and we have the directory username and password established, we need to decide, what do we want to cache? And we would do that with this section down here. You can see that I've selected the cache Windows updates and cache server downloads. I don't know about the other word right there. We don't talk about that. The cache Windows updates is going to, again, affect my patching for my agents, and this also includes third-party patching as well, if available, or if you have it, where the agents will go and check that location, put the temporary file there if the download is not there, and then go out and download the file for the rest of your agents. Same goes for any type of applications that you may be pushing out to your agents. So that is where our server downloads come in, where maybe you're pushing out a particular application or program to your agents. It will do the same, where it's going to cache that application or whatever it is in that location and go out and download it for the rest of the agents. So with those selections in place, and now I have my template established, I need to set up my caching group. Now to populate the group, first I'm going to have to, of course, come up with a search, because I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to manually move around 200, 300 agents into a group. That's going to be a terrible time for everybody, having to manually move everything in and out of a group. So we'll set up a search here. And looking at our earlier example, I've set up a search to use either or EDF that we created earlier in Automate. So you can see by default, when you create a search, it is going to start out with and. So I've changed that to or by simply clicking on it. And then I'm pointing out the two locations where I have the EDFs, and the search is checking to see if either of those are true. And if they are, then the search finds the machines down here. In this case, we have the two machines from Pizza Pete's, and we can see that the location EDF for the file cache has been enabled, and we can see the setting is 1. You can also see the computer one here listed here as well, but since those aren't checked, those are coming back or returning a value of 0 or false. If those were checked as well, we would see 1s in all of these, because the way this search is set up, either EDF setting satisfies this search and therefore will pull the machines that we need to pull. So now that I have my search in place, I can go ahead and create the group. In creating my cache-enabled group, now I've selected my caching-enabled search in the group here. You also want to note that I'm using the limit to search feature. That's important here because if we have a case where the client's bandwidth maybe gets increased, we do this caching setup to help really save on bandwidth. If we have 200 agents and they are all hitting that update all at the same time, and you have a client that has 100 down and 100 up, that's going to bring the network to its knees. Whereas if you have one agent that goes out first, downloads the update, and the other agents are told to wait, now you only have that download happening once, preserving your bandwidth for whatever else the client is doing. The agent finishes the update, it puts the file in there, those other agents check back again. Now they can grab the file locally rather than all hitting the internet all at once. If that situation ever changes and you don't need caching enabled for that client anymore, maybe they get a nice gigabit or 2 gigabit Ethernet connection in there, so they have plenty of bandwidth now, you can go ahead and have that limit to search feature turned on, turn off the EDF at the location or on the computers, and then those agents will go out and download updates normally. Since they will no longer meet the search criteria, they'll get pulled out of the group. And this is where we assign the template that we set up earlier. This is our cache template that is getting assigned, and I've set it with a priority of 1. This is going to pretty much guarantee that any agents in this group are going to be assigned the template settings from this cache template. All I'm establishing here is the cache settings itself. I've left the rest of the template alone. So if there's any conflicts with any other settings, or maybe if you've had cache settings in your default template established, this template will actually override even the default cache settings if you have set up any in your default template. So this will be particular to those agents, again, where that EDF is set up, and the priority of 1 is going to give that template pretty much the highest priority. You just have to think of your template priorities as people waiting in line, and the first person waiting in line is going to have priority over the 10th person waiting in line. So having this template priority set as 1 will pretty much guarantee if you have cache settings set anywhere else, it's going to get overridden by this template. So we have our Windows location set up. We have our client location set up. Our EDFs are in place. Our search is in place. Our template is in place, and we have our group. We have everything laid down now. We pretty much have this little caching house built at this point. All our agents are there in the group. They're all waiting now to do their thing and to get updates. So let's verify the setup first before we go ahead and go 100% with this setup. And we'll start up by verifying the setup by testing the credentials. This can be done very easily on any of the agents in that location that now have caching set up. And we can do this in the background without disturbing any end users as well. So if we want to test this out on an active machine during their day, that's okay too. We're not going to interrupt anything because we're going to be using the command prompt on the agent screen itself here. We're not having to log into the machine and map a drive or anything like that. So we'll open up the command prompt and we'll start out with a very simple net use command. So in the command prompt at the bottom, I'm going to do net use and then drive letter X colon, whatever letter you want to make it, it doesn't matter. Then the location or the drive that we're going to establish, the username, and then under here is the password. Sorry, I'm not going to give everyone the serve admin password here. It's very private information. So once we have that set in here and I press enter, it will come back and let us know that the command is completed successfully. Well, if you want to know a little bit more than that or verify a little further, then following this up, you can simply type a regular net use command followed by nothing else, and it will list out that we have established a connection with the X drive in this case, and that we're able to connect to it. So now I know that I can see the cache location drive from this agent, I can connect to it, I can talk to it. But we want to test this a little further, of course. So we want to make sure and verify that we can move files to and from this location. Because again, when the first agent comes in and it goes to check for an update and sees it's not there, it's going to put a temporary file in this folder. So it has to be able to write. Once that agent goes and downloads the installer and installs on itself, it's going to put that installer, whatever it's for, into that folder, and then it's going to delete the temporary file that it put in there before. So now other agents will come in and just see the installer and grab that. So we have to be sure that we can first copy the file, and I do that by doing a very simple test.txt file, moving it over to the X drive in this case. And then I went to the caching location itself and verified on that machine that the test.txt file is there. Now to make sure the agent can delete those temporary files, I'll go ahead and delete that file out of the X drive, still on the same agent. And when you press enter on there, you will get a warning and this confirmation window asking, are you sure you want to execute this delete command? So I'll press yes, and then I get a reply back of okay. So once again, I go back to the cache location that I've established in Windows, and I can see that the test.txt file is gone. So by doing that, I now know that my credentials are working 100%. And again, these are the same credentials I either have in the General tab or in the Deployments and Defaults tab on the client location. So now we have to check the device in Automate itself. This is where we're going to make sure that the agent is actually getting assigned to the group and getting the template settings assigned to it as well. So the Automate agent knows, okay, I have a caching location set up. I need to go to this location to be able to pull updates. And if not there, I need to go to the internet to pull updates. So we're going to look at the Edu Workstation 3 here. And I'll right click on the automation icon at the top and go to the agent's effective policy. Under the effective policy in the group section, I can see now that this agent is a member of the cache enabled group. This is the grade master group we set up before, and it has the template name cache. So to view the templates on this agent, we can look at the computer's current config, and we can see there's our cache template. And again, there is our %drive %, username %, and then of course under here is our %password %. So this agent is getting the caching settings applied to this machine to be able to cache and get updates through the Windows Update cache or program cache. So we've set everything up. We have all of our settings in place. We verified the settings work on the agent. We know the credentials are working now, and we can write to and delete things from that folder. Now comes the final check. This is the true test of caching and whether it's going to work or not on the agent. So what we want to do here now is, again, I've gone to the automation section on the agent, and I've gone to the patching section, and I'm looking at patches. And again, you can test this out with any patch that is set to approve and not attempted. I realize I have a lot of them here, but these are all third-party things. Again, if you have third-party patching set up on your Automate system, caching will work for that as well. So I will find one of just any of my approved, not attempted patches here, and we right-click on it, and we tell the agent to install the patch right now. When the agent starts doing its thing, I'm going to come back up here to the automation icon again, and I'm going to go to the command section. In the command section, I can see that I've just established the command to install that patch, and it is in the pending status here. When that command flips to executing, as it has here now I can go to that cache location where we set up the cache to begin with, where this all started, and I can view pretty much view the progress of this as it's happening with the agent and the cache machine itself. So the agent first has started by checking this location and going, oh, this update's not here. I'm going to put a temporary file here so other agents will know that this is being sought out right now, or this is being downloaded by me right now, and those other agents will know to wait. Other agents come in, they'll see that temporary file, and they'll wait for this to be completed. While that file is being downloaded to the machine, that temporary file is remaining there. We can see it started the download and it's pulling over the installer files it needs. Again, the other agents will they may see that file here, but they'll also notice this .cache file and they'll know to wait. Once it moves further along, the temporary file is now gone. We have an Adobe Acrobat Reader DC MST file here now. We now have the installer here because the original agent going out to get this patch has finished installing the patch now. Once it is finished and verified that it is installed on the machine, it throws the installer file on here that it used to install that patch. So now other agents will check this location and see that, oh, this installer file is here now. I'm good to go. I can go ahead and pull whatever file it is I need to pull. So this is, again, great because this is going to cut down on the amount of bandwidth taken. Because again, if you have a lot of agents at a location that don't have a very high bandwidth, this is extremely useful because now we're taking those possible 200 agents and we're just making this download happen once. This is especially useful when, of course, Microsoft puts out its feature updates or updates for Windows 10, where you're basically installing a whole new OS on the system. So those updates can be huge. And a whole bunch of agents hitting the network all at once like that can cause a lot of bandwidth problems. So having just one agent going out and doing the work and then the other ones just working locally will save you a lot of time in actually distributing that patch. And it may actually be faster because once one agent is done, the other ones will very quickly go across the network and get that update. So some key takeaways from today's webinar is use client locations for file, URL, or update caching. You can make all your locations unique because they're using a template or maybe one of the other template, depending if you're going to use the general tab settings or the deployments and defaults. And then you can keep your settings unique for each client location, which of course will help you save bandwidth at low bandwidth clients. Again, you have 200 agents, maybe at 100 down, 100 up connection. If all those agents are hitting that connection all at once, it's going to be a nightmare. Everything's going to be slow. Everything's going to take a long time because everything's getting cut up and distributed amongst those agents all at once. So this is great for saving your bandwidth where it's not available. Then you create your templates to use admin or unique access to the cache. Maybe you could have a particular template that is going to use something special or anything like that for a client. You could set up your own private client cache group in this case. These settings are very flexible. In this one, I've just set up a regular cache template that is going to be a generalized cache group for the majority of my clients. And that template is going to use the general settings. So I'll have my username and my password established on my client tab, on my client locations under the general tab. And then there's where I can control the username and password credentials on there. So if they ever change at the client, I just need to go to that general tab on the location and change it there, and all my agents get updated with the new credentials. Again, if I have to test that out, I can do that in the background on the command prompt on my agent to verify everything's working before they go ahead and run through the next update cycle. And with that, do we have any questions?
All right, so you guys can go ahead and post any questions you have over in the Q&A pod or in the chat pod. Either one works for me. I'm just putting some time in so you guys have a chance to type all those up because I haven't seen anything yet.
All right. I do see the question of will this be recorded? Yes, it will. So
Yep.
if anyone wondering if they had to step away or if something else called their attention, I understand. I've been through the world of support myself, so I know you can get pulled away when you're trying to watch a webinar or learn something and you have an urgent call come up or something comes up that you need to take care of right now. So this is recorded for everyone and it will be on the university once this session is done today. So you can always come back and watch it later.
Two universal truths. Clients will always call at the most inopportune time, and whenever you have a question for your manager, they will disappear. Just the reality
Yep,
of it.
always happens. You can
Always
almost
happens.
guarantee it. All right, is there any other questions?
I'm not seeing any just yet. I do want to give them a couple more minutes to type anything that's up. So I will just remind everyone, feel free to reach out to us at education@connectwise.com. We live and breathe off of your feedback. We got feedback that we had a previous thing about caching. Partners were saying, hey, do you have anything updated on it? So we decided to put this webinar together, and Naco did a bang up job, in my humble opinion, putting this together and updating it with a little bit more information to make things a bit easier and add some additional testing features to it. So if there's any burning questions you have about Automate or anything that you would like to learn more about, feel free to drop us an email so we can probably put a webinar together for that as well.
And if you want to take this to a more forum type discussion and discuss this not only with us, but maybe some of your colleagues or any other of the partners out there, you can also go to virtualcommunity.connectwise.com, get signed up there. And with that, you do have to have SSO established. So if you have SSO established in your account, you can go ahead and sign up at virtualcommunity.connectwise.com and you can discuss this webinar, or if you have any other questions pertaining to anything in Automate, go ahead and post those questions there. It's a huge community, not only us ourselves, but you get access to the product managers and even some of the people that work behind the scenes making the products that you guys use. And you can get answers directly from them as well. So either one, education@connectwise.com or virtualcommunity.connectwise.com, and we can get those questions answered for you.
All right. Well, Naka, I think you just did such an amazing job explaining everything that nobody has any additional questions.
All right.
All right.
All right, everyone. Well, have a great rest of your week. If you don't see any of us again, have a great weekend. For those of you US based, have a good 3-day weekend coming up with Memorial Day, and hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.
And hopefully I'll get to see some of you over at IT Nation Secure if you're headed down to Orlando for that. All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.